Hello, Knights. Welcome to your next lesson over data. Today we are talking about something called a histogram. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this before, but yes, it does in fact sound like Instagram, but they are very different. So I could sit here and talk to you about what a histogram is and what it looks like and all of these little details, but I think it's actually going to be the most helpful for us to just jump in and try to actually create a histogram, and that'll help us understand better what it's used for. So we're just going to start with our first problem. When Felicia came back from college to visit her family, she found a whole bunch of her old report cards. She wanted to see how good her grades were, so she wrote down all of her grades in a chart to make into a histogram. So if you see here, this chart here is all of her grades from 6th through 12th grade. So the first thing that we need to do is determine our interval. What interval would make the most sense for organizing grades? So this is basically saying, I don't want to list every single piece of data as its own number. I want to put them into groups. So you may think to yourself, what is something that makes the most sense for us to group our grades by? When you get a report card, it does give you a number, but a lot of times if you say like, oh, I got an 88, that means I got a B. If I got a 96, that means I got an A. So the interval that probably makes the most sense for organizing grades is A's are 90s, B's are 80s, C's are 70s, and D is below 60s, up down to 50. So that's usually how we categorize grades. So now we're going to go through all of the data and we're going to count up how many grades each interval has and create a frequency chart. So this is pretty similar to something we've done before, but now instead of doing it with just one number, we're doing it within interval. So I'm going to start by looking at her 6th grade right here, her 6th grade grades. Her first grade is an 87. Is an 87 a D, a C, a B, or an A? Well, like we wrote here, and like it says here, a B is something that is in the 80s. So where I have 87, I'm going to just put a tally mark and cross off the 87. Her next grade was a 76. Is a 76 going to be an A, B, C, or a D? Well, for the intervals that we see here, a C should be in the 70s. Then we have a 92, that's an A, and she got a 95, that's also an A. In 7th grade, she got a 77, so that's a C. I'm going to put a tally there, cross it out. 82 is a B, cross it out. 76 is a C, cross it out. A 90 is an A, cross that one out. Oops. Get rid of that little dot. All right, in 8th grade, she got a 68. Whoops, a little slip up there. So she got a 68, which is a D, a 74, which is a C, an 85, which is a B, and a 94, which is an A. In 9th grade, she got an 83, which is a B. She got a 75, which is a C. She got a 96, which is an A. And she got a 91, which is also an A. In 10th grade, she got a 65, so that's a D. She got a 77, which is a C. She got a 94, which is an A. And an 86, which is a B. In 11th grade, she got a 98, which is an A. A 92, which is also an A, an 87, which is a B, and an 84, which is also a B. Then in 12th grade, she got an 82, which is a B, an 86, which is a B, a 92, which is an A, and a 90, which is also an A. Over here in the far right column, we see that we're looking for our total. So we're just going to count our tally marks. For D's, she got a total of 2. For C's, she got a total of 6. For B's, she got a total of 9. And for A's, she got a total of 11. So we've just basically figured out how frequently she got A's, how frequently she got B's, how frequently she got C's, and how often she got D's. So what a histogram is, whenever you look down here, notice this kind of looks like a bar graph, but at the bottom, instead of it just being a single number, they are actually what we call intervals. They are grouped into bunches of numbers instead of being individual numbers. So what we're going to do first, we're going to graph this for D's. So for D's, we see that the total was 2, which means I'm going to shade up to 2 for D's. And then for C's, she got 6. So now beside that, I'm going to shade up to 6. For B's, she got 9, so I'm going to shade up to 9. And notice this one, it will be about halfway up because it doesn't go quite up to 10. If you don't do this in color, that's fine. I'm just doing it so that it's easier to understand in the notes. And then finally, for A's, she got 11, so we're going to shade up to 11 for A's. Make it nice and pretty. There. So this looks very, very, very similar to a bar graph, but it's slightly different because, as we mentioned before, our intervals at the bottom are not single numbers or single like animals or favorite colors or whatever. They are categories of numbers. So histograms will actually always use numbers, and they will always be numbers that are grouped together. So it'll never just be one number, it'll be a group of numbers. But notice it's still similar because on one side we have frequency and grades, it still has a title, and it still has axes. So it's similar to a bar graph, but still a little bit different. All right, we're going to go ahead and go to the next page. There's a teacher model. So now that we've actually created one, let's do a little bit of analyzing. So the histogram below shows the number of homes sold by a realty company in the year 2009. I know that was a really long time ago. I'm sorry that this example is so old, but we're going to analyze it anyway. So notice here we have number of homes sold on the vertical axis and the months on bottom. And in our first interval here, this says January through March. You can just think of this as like the first through third months, so like 1 through 3. Because January, February, and March are the first 3 months of the year. Then we have April through June, which you can think of as 4 through 6. For July through September, you can think of that as 7 through 9. And for October through December, you can think of that as 10 through 12. So even though it looks like it's not using numbers, it technically is. So before I do any kind of answering questions, blah, 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 I'm going to immediately start by looking at where my graphs cut off and make sure I label them. So the first bar goes up to 10, so this one goes to 10. April through June goes up to 15. July through September, it may be kind of hard to see, so you may want to like draw a line. This one goes to 13. And for the last one, if you draw a straight line across, you can see this one goes to 11. I'm just labeling them now because I'll probably be using that information in the problem. So the first question, letter A, how many intervals does this histogram have? How large are the intervals? So the intervals, I already highlighted them. Here, 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 here. In total, there are 4 intervals. And it's asking how large are the intervals. So if I look at this group, 1 through 3, that means 3 months. 4 through 6 is also 3 months. 7 through 9 is 3 months. 10 through 12 is 3 months. So each of these little intervals are how many months big? They are each 3 months. So 4 intervals, each of them are 3 months. The next question, B, how many homes were sold between the months of January and March? Well, January and March is the first interval, so that one's 10, right? 10, in case you're wondering where I got that. The second interval, April and June. This one is April and June, so that one is 15. Between July and September is 13, and October and December is 11. So what we're basically saying is, between January and March, they sold 10 homes. Maybe it was in January, maybe they were in February, maybe they were in March. All that matters is we know that they happened in those 3 months. So the next question, during which interval did they sell the most homes? So whenever I look at the bars and the intervals, which one had the most, 10, 15, 13, or 11? Well, the most would be the 15. And I wouldn't say most is 15. I would say most is which interval? April through June. All right, and then I'd ask what was the least. So the most was April through June, but the least, which interval was the smallest? Well, the smallest number was 10, and that one was January through March. All right, the next question, letter D. How many total homes did they sell in 2009? All that means I need to do is take my 4 intervals, add up all those numbers. So if I add 10 plus 15, that gives me 25. Add 13 gives me 38. And then add the 11 means that they sold 49 homes total. All I had to do was add up each of the intervals and see what the total got. All right, the next question is a little bit trickier. Is it possible to determine the month in which they sold the most homes? Why or why not? So the information given to us in the histogram is only which group of months we sold the most homes in. So even though we can see here 15 was the highest amount that they sold, it doesn't tell us were most of those in April, were most of those in June, or were most of those in May. Okay, we don't know for specific individual months. So for this one, no, we can't. We can only tell which group had the most. Had the most. So we can't tell for an individual month how much they got. All we can tell is which group they got the most. All right, and our final question, which data set could have been used to make the histogram? So basically, we're going to look at all of these sets of data and decide which one would make the same histogram if we did a frequency chart. So notice in my first one, for January through March, the total number of homes sold was 10. That means for this data set to work, the months January, February, and March should add up to be the number 10. So if I take 4, 3, and 3, 4 plus 3 is 7, 7 plus 3 makes 10, so this one works out. If I look at the next table, January, February, and March, that would be 2 plus 5 plus 3, 2 plus 5 is 7, 7 plus 3 is 10, that one's good. And for the last answer choice, January, February, and March, 5 plus 4 is 9, but 9 plus 5 is 14. So since this is 14, this one doesn't work because it's supposed to be 10. So this one I can just know that it doesn't work. All right, now I'm going to go back and look at the next interval, April through June. Since April, May, and June in my table is supposed to be 15. So since I know it's supposed to be 15, I need to add them up and see, do I get 15? So 5 plus 7 is 12, 12 plus 1 is 13. This one is no good because this number is supposed to add up to be 15. Here, April, May, June, 6 plus 7 is 13. 13 plus 2 is 15, so that one's good. At this point, I could say to myself, oh yeah, I know it's letter B because A and C are wrong. But we're not going to be lazy. We're going to take the time to really make sure that letter B is correct by checking the other answers. So for the next interval here, July through September, we know that that number is supposed to be 13. So we're going to count for 13. For July, August, and September, 4 plus 5 is 9. 9 plus 4 is 13. That one's good. And for my last interval, for October through December, that one is supposed to be 11. So let's check with our last interval, October, November, December. 5 plus 2 is 9. 5 plus 2 is 7. 7 plus 4 is 11. So we know for sure B is correct. And that A and C don't work. Whew. All right, so obviously I don't expect for you to have all of these colors on here. If you have this many colors, that's great and probably helpful, but I do expect to see this amount of work on your notes whenever we come back and check these tomorrow. So your assignment after finishing this video is to answer the 2 practice questions by 1, creating a histogram, and 2, answering these questions about the histogram that's already been made for you. I strongly recommend that you use pencil on these notes, because if you mess up when we start checking over it, you can't fix a bar graph that you've done in pen if you do it wrong. So please use a pencil so that you don't have to worry about whether or not you messed up, and you can just fix it whenever we check over it. So again, your assignment now is to finish these last 2 problems with work on all of them. I know that some of us yesterday made some excuses about not knowing that we should have finished the homework, but I said very clearly, and I say it again, do the last problems, show your work, or it will be considered a demerit because it's not completed. Okay, so finish these up. We will see y'all tomorrow. Have a good one. See you later.